2 p.m. May all members present state their name for the record.
Hughes Button.
Andrew Larson.
Phoenix Comstown.
Ava Avra.
And Abigail Mohammed as chair. Quorum has been established with 5 members present. May any member of the public please state their name for the record.
Tyler Sklar.
Megan Laney.
Riley Smolinski. Caroline Kim.
Please keep in mind that these meetings may be visually or audio recorded. Alrighty, we're on to the first piece of legislation, SSB 2026-1001. There is not an author or sponsor present, so we move into 5 minutes of debate. I'm just gonna give you guys a second to read it, look over it, and then we'll start debate. Okay, debate starting now.
I can start. I think this is relatively straightforward. I think it's important that we, have more forums that allow the public to connect with student government. I think this is, adding that to the codes for the Roots Agency, which is relatively new and still obviously figuring out what works best for them. So I think, I think this is a really positive change, and I don't see, any mistakes. It was a pretty simple code revision. So
I'm encouraged to see both executive branch and legislative branch collaborating on this one, since it seems to affect both parts of our student government. So I'm glad to see that both parts are collaborating there. And yeah, I agree, this seems like a great initiative, good planning, good legislation.
Okay, seeing as there's no further debate, we now move into motions. Are there any motions at this time?
I move to pass SSB 2026-1001, finance consent.
There's been a motion to pass SSB 2026-1001 by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Seeing none, that motion passes. We now move into SSB 2026-1002. There is not an author or sponsor present. Again, we move into 5 minutes of debate. Is everyone ready for debate, or do you need a minute? I'll give you guys a minute. Okay, we now move into 5 minutes of debate, starting now.
I think once again, this is a pretty straightforward bill, but I think it's valuable to recognize it's a pretty important resource for students. I mean, how often you have to be in professional attire, and that can be very expensive and difficult to find, get access to quality used ones. And so I think it's an important resource that we advertise and that we continue to support as a student body.
Yeah, harping a little bit more on what you said, I also feel like it's important for the Senate to advocate for students having these resources. So I think very straightforward. I don't have any further comment. I think it's a great piece of legislation.
Agreed, yeah, it's awesome. I don't know if this even matters. It appears to be in a smaller font size than the rest of the legislation submitted today. Is that standardized?
No, it's a formatting thing, so we don't have to make a motion. I
Awesome.
can just move it up to 12.
Cool. But yeah, that's the only thing I could find. Everything else looks very sound.
Okay. Alright, seeing as there's no more debate, we now move into motions. Are there any motions at this time?
Move to pass SSB 2026-1002 by unanimous consent.
There's been a motion to pass SSB 2026-1002 by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Seeing none, that motion passes. We now move on to SSB 2026-1003. There are no authors or sponsors present. We again move into 5 minutes of debate, giving you guys 1 more minute to read this over. Okay, we now move into 5 minutes of debate, starting now.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like this is pretty straightforward. I love how it addresses that students have other kinds of costs to pay for as well as like textbooks, school materials, notebooks, and everything like that. And I do feel like this continues to foster the relationship between campus libraries and students by having this blue book drive. And yeah, I really agree with this.
I also agree that I think it's important that this is accomplishing. However, correct me if I'm wrong, therefore clauses should end with periods, not semicolons, right?
Yes, that's
Okay, so those last, I guess the first three, the last one ends in a period, but the first three therefore need to be periods.
Yes.
But other than that, I think that's the only thing I saw. Yeah, just periods.
This isn't a make or break thing for me. I would like to see more sourcing, particularly some of the therefore clauses. I see one that's like addressing the rising textbook costs. I would have liked to see that sourced. Talking about how sustainability is a UF initiative, I would like to see that sourced. It's not a deal breaker for me, but I think moving forward that is a thing we should be cognizant of. But yeah, it's a great initiative, strong legislation.
Yeah, and I think in the future, let's be a little bit more forceful in having authors and sponsors come. So that is something that we can add if we need to. So thank you. Alright, seeing as there's no further debate, we're now online for motions. Are there any motions?
I motion to approve SSB.
Can you rescind that? Just rescind the motion.
I rescind the
Motion, thanks.
Okay, I move to amend SSB 2026-1003 and remove and replace the 3 semicolons in the first 3 therefore clauses with a period
There's been a motion.
by unanimous consent.
There's been a motion to amend SSB 2026-1003 to change the semicolons in the 3 therefore clauses to periods by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Seeing none, that motion passes. Are there any further motions at this time?
Move to pass SSB 2026-1003 by unanimous consent.
There's been a motion to pass SSB 2026-1003 by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? Seeing none, that motion passes. We now move into SSB 2026-1004. Seeing as there is an author present, you have 5 minutes of presentation time whenever you're ready.
Thank you. So this resolution, and I do have a couple tweaks that I talked about with the chairwoman before the meeting that I think are worthy of discussion. But the essential root of the bill would be to urge UFPD to reconsider their official agreement with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, particularly in response to recent events which have demonstrated ICE to be, in certain senses, a rogue agency that has promoted violence on US streets among citizens and non-citizens alike. Seeing ICE as a destabilizing force which has made the communities it's in less safe, and recognizing that we as UF student representatives don't want to see that violence and destabilization on our campus, and to voice that through urging UFPD to reconsider their official partnership. Some of the discussion points that have been surrounding this resolution are not a desire to alienate or make enemies with UFPD. I very strongly value our relationship with UFPD as a student senate. I was one of the senators who sponsored the recent resolution thanking them for their outstanding collaboration with the student senate. And I know that they're a strong ally of ours, which I think makes this legislation even more important. They have shown us to be a strong ally in hearing student voices, and I think this is a particularly urgent instance where we need to be holding them accountable in that respect, not antagonizing them, obviously, which is why some of the tweaks that I would propose are removing some of the slightly more inflammatory language, such as strictly calling on them to terminate their agreement, shifting language, and this can still be tweaked moving forward, to something along the lines of reconsider the agreement or speak with students about the agreement. Because I do want this to be a productive stem of a relationship or continuation of a pre-existing strong relationship rather than a UF Senate telling UFPD how to do their jobs. But I think it's super important that we in UFPD honor our shared commitment for campus safety by starting to open those discussions up for creating a safer campus by removing this violent presence that we see currently. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
We're now in line for 5 minutes of question and answer, starting now.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, how, in your opinion, does this resolution meet the 5 criteria, most specifically focusing on the legality aspect of it?
This is a resolution. It's a statement of the Senate's opinion, basically. We have freedom of speech as an entity, and therefore, us simply voicing our opinion is not in any way illegal.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that, understanding like sort of the political climate, do you think that there's potential for this resolution and ICE and UFPD, if they went along with this, do you think there's potential for backlash from other agencies and other entities that UFPD works for that could affect their funding and they're more mission critical, they're more critical mission of kind of ensuring student safety?
I cannot speak to what federal agencies will do.
Okay, seeing as there's no more questions, we're now in line for 5 minutes of debate, starting now.
Okay, I guess I can start. So I want to preface by saying, like, personal beliefs, like, completely aside, like, I have no issue with those resolutions standing for, like that's not what I have concern for, but I do have, like, some concerns regarding like, the implication. I did a little bit of background research and essentially found, obviously, Florida policy, like, statewide, is, like, pro-cooperation with immigration enforcement. And that was codified in 2025 by Statute 908.104, which requires any official responsible directing or supervising such agencies shall use best efforts to support enforcement of federal immigration law. The language is relatively vague in the statutes that was passed, kind of, insinuating that, like, they should cooperate with, like, everything that they're essentially requested of. And since that passed by the state legislation, like, that's the law in the state at the moment. So I do, have some concern that because, we are, like, by statute, like, pro-cooperation, that, UFPD or UF as a state entity, like, if they did meaningfully try to, like, follow this resolution, we'd essentially be, asking them to be non-compliant with state law. And I believe that, the prohibitions in place under the statute do, have implications, I guess, because, like, I don't want to put them in a scenario where, like, they realistically have no legal, like, ability to exit the agreement because of state law. And I think, that could be a concern, at least that I have. I think, I'll let other people talk as well, but the codes, or, like, the statute is, like, pretty explicit in, like, kind of the repercussions that could be faced. Chapter 908.107, the enforcement section, discusses how any executive or administrative state, county municipal officer who violates his or her duties under this chapter, under the immigration, statute, could face potential suspension from office. Additionally, the Attorney General may file suit against a local government entity or local law enforcement agency in a court of competent jurisdiction for essentially being non-compliant with the statute. So I do just have the concern that, like, the implications of urging them to essentially, like no issue with the resolution itself, just, like, the implications for UFPD would be concerning for me, at least, but I'll let other people speak.
Understood. If I can respond to that super quickly, I think that's why it's important to kind of look at the wording here, and I would be more than happy to adjust wording to explicitly terminate both in what is currently the final therefore clause and also the title, shifting it more to open discussion or reconsider, so that it could be opening a door to student conversation rather than strict mandate, because I do hear those concerns and do not want to get UFPD in any form of legal jeopardy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be obviously beneficial. I think, in the current form, I don't think we have the ability to urge them to be non-compliant with state law. I still think, like, I'm just worried that, like, there is, like, the political atmosphere and, like, the implication that, like, the state legislature just passed these, like, very explicit, very vague, cooperative agreements with immigration enforcement that, we're just putting them in, like, a bad situation in sense of, like, you know, they get most of their funding from the state, they get most of their support from FDLE, like the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So I think, you know, creating an atmosphere and environment where, you know, they are legally required to do this, like officers could be suspended, the agency could face like, you know, legal repercussions. I just am concerned under like the implication criteria that we would essentially be, you know, forcing upon them by, you know, passing language that requests them to like, you know, be non-compliant with law.
Sure. I would argue that it's the state government that's putting local police departments, particularly UFPD, in an uncomfortable position. Look, our purpose and UFPD's purpose is very clear, to protect student safety. That's what this resolution is all about, how it's of the utmost important to put safety first. If the state government is passing, as particularly as you mentioned, vague legislation that's hard to parse the meaning of and hard to enforce, I think that's very unfortunate, but I would argue that that's an instance of the state government putting our police officers in a bad spot, rather than us simply urging them to hear student voices when it comes to campus safety. But I do hear and respect your points.
Kind of on that note, like I do agree with like a lot of what you're saying, but I do think it's also important to consider like UFPD doesn't have like the political landscape to also consider state law and like changing that law. And like I do agree that like it is UFPD's responsibility for student safety on campus. However, when we kind of look at it from more of like a state point of view, I feel like it's a little bit out of UFPD's scope going against state law.
All right, thank you guys for a great debate. We're now in line for 2 minutes of final privilege. Whenever you're ready.
Awesome. So thank you for those thoughts, and I do want this to be an evolving conversation, looking at different ways that this legislation can be formatted and worded so that it can target what we want to target, and focus on a message of campus safety and collaboration with UFPD, rather than you know, encouraging illegal behavior or encouraging behavior that could see consequences from them from a state perspective. So I think it's important that we talked about that. However, at the end of the day, our responsibility as a student government institution is to advocate for the students. We have to take all these other things in mind. We are legally required to take all these other things in mind, such as the 5 criteria. But at the end of the day, our job is to look out for the students. As harsh as this sounds, not UFPD. We have a collaboration with them, and I think we should respect that and honor that and continue to work in a way to foster that relationship moving forward. But when it comes down to it, we have a responsibility to stand up for student voices, stand up for the common good of the students, and I believe this resolution does that, and therefore it must be passed. Thank you.
We are now in line for motions. Are there any motions at this time?
I move to pass SSB 2026-1004 by unanimous consent.
There's been a motion to pass SSB 2026-1004 by unanimous consent. Are there any objections?
I object.
Follow up?
Hold up.
I would make the same motion, not by unanimous consent.
There's been a motion to pass SSB 2026-1004 not by unanimous consent. We're gonna go into a roll call vote. Caroline, do you have everyone's names lined up?
Yes.
Okay, and then when I call your name, indicate how you wish to vote on passing the bill. So if you're in favor of passing it, say pass. If not, say fail or abstain. Larson,
Pass.
Putnam,
Nay.
Phoenix,
Nah.
Ava,
No.
and Chair abstains. So a vote of 3 nay to 1 pass, the vote does not pass. We're not in line for any further motions.
I move to fail SSB 2026-1004 by vote on the grounds of implication due to the possibility of being non-compliant with Florida Statute 908.104, the University Police Department having the potential to lose funding from the state, officers possibly being suspended from their jobs, and the implications of putting public safety at risk due to these negative implications.
Is that by unanimous consent?
No, by a vote.
By vote. There's been a motion to fail SSB 2026-1004 by another roll call vote. So it's gonna be the same procedure. Larson,
Nay.
Putnam,
Aye.
Phoenix,
Aye.
Ava,
Aye.
and the chair abstains. A vote of 3 to 1, that motion passes. SSB 2026-1004 has been approved. And I now adjourn this meeting at 2:20 p.m.